the podcast where we dive deep into purpose, healing, and living your God given potential through the power of voice. I'm your host, speaker, author, certified facilitator, and human rights consultant, Michelle Ebalaroza Kawano. And today we are in for a treat, a powerful conversation. Our guest today is Alex Kain, author of The Philosophy, a critical upgrade for humanity, a bold and thought provoking manifesto calling us to question everything. Question everything. Isn't that great? Rethink the systems that we live in and step into a more authentic, purpose driven living. Alex's journey began with a powerful internal question. Is that all there is? A question that, we feel but few dare to explore, dare to even ask. Through his work, Alex challenges the traditional definition of success, moving beyond chasing money and status, and instead calls us into a life rooted in awareness, empathy, and intentional impact. This conversation is for the thinkers, the seekers, and the change makers, and the ones who know deep down, that we are created for more. So let's talk story with Alex Kain. Alex, thank you for coming in. So wonderful to have you. How are you?
I'm fine, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to this conversation because I know we are both aligned in how we see the world and our place in it. And yeah, I'm just so looking forward to this.
So awesome. So I want to start with this question before going into the Aloha Always framework that I always do. That's one thing that ties in all of my guests. But I want to ask, was there a defining moment when you realized the life that you were building didn't align with who you truly were? And how did that moment lead to the philosophy?
Yeah, that's where it all began. So, I think many of us, or probably all people, we have a moment in our lives when we see that the world we're living in, our lives, the systems that we're living in, sometimes, not always, but sometimes don't align with who we feel we are. And we feel that misalignment and it shows up in different ways. And I guess for me, I've always had this feeling that the world that we live in is good for some people, but not for all. And for me, that on its own was a red flag. For me, living my best life and doing what had been modeled to me as success, was all about chasing the money, chasing wealth, chasing status, all of those things that have been modeled to us. But somewhere on that journey, I was following the model that had been laid out for me. But I found that it just didn't feel right because me having success on my own didn't feel like success when those around me were really doing it tough. And I think that probably came to me. I think at one stage I was staying in a resort somewhere. I think it was in Bali somewhere, as you can see. And I walked out. I'd had a beautiful time in the resort, but I walked out onto the main street and I was being approached by people who were offering me trinkets and looking for some money and help. And I think I really felt that contrast. And I felt that the world that some of us live in, that we surround ourselves with, can often bubble wrap us from the whole world. And so, the reality that we see is not reality, it's only ever our reality. And so I wanted to reframe that for myself. And I began to start questioning everything. I began looking at how how is this okay? How do we enable this to be okay? And that's really where the idea for the book came about from, the philosophy, which then became, well, really my reason for being.
Wow. You mentioned that, like, seeing a contrast between what you're actually living to seeing someone else's life and what it is there. And it happened the same for me. That's why I was like listening to you and I'm like, oh my gosh, how you said, like, our lives, you're in Australia, I'm in Hawaii, and it's so similar. I was in Africa and I knew that we were going to visit like the Maasai village and everything like that. And I was like, oh, let's bring some little toys and all these things for the kids. And I've done early childhood education for many, many years of my life. And so I was like, oh, this will be good. But when I got there and I realized how it was, and it's like they have nothing. They really, like, for us, right? In my vision, they live in huts. The kids are all barefoot, and they're outside. And so when I say they have nothing, it's the things that in my mind equal to having things, right? But I was watching them and that's changed everything because they were so happy.
Mm.
They were together. That kind of thing. And it's like they were like so excited to show us inside their house, like that. Like, and everything was great for them. Their level of bliss was so high. They're like, "Oh, this is so good, like, let me show you." And I'm like, "Wow." So,
Absolutely. And it's because we relate it to what we know to be,
yes.
what a good life means. And yet, often when you see people who have very little, they are far more happier. I had a
Yeah.
similar experience in Cambodia. Went and visited one of the villages there, and we brought coloring books and pencils and things for the kids, and they were just so joyful in receiving it. They lined up and they were just so happy to see us and to receive something. And it wasn't that, I looked around and I thought, well, this is very rustic and it's, they've got not a lot. But I think what they do have is a really strong sense of community and family and all of that. And that, for me, is true wealth. All right. And so
Yes.
it's not that they're poor in the sense overall, they may be lacking in some of the resources and things that we have, but they are wealthy in other ways that we would probably be a lot poorer in as well. So it's not trying to compare that, who has more is better off, but it's my position on this is it's not about we all have to have the same things. It's about we need to set a minimum level of dignity for every person, whether that's medical, whether it's housing, whether it's just food. Everyone should have that. Where you go from there, that's fine. That's up to you. But every
Yeah.
person who has come into this world through no choice of their own is now um, enslaved on the system of having to support themselves, which keeps them off doing other things, more creative pursuits and more aligned with who they want to be. But we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. No, it just was like, that is such a good thing because, yeah, we have our sense of where we are, and then we look at someone else and feel, oh, they don't have a lot or whatever. But that's what changed me. And it actually literally started Blessed to be a Blessing worldwide because we are blessed to be a blessing worldwide. And I was like, these people have so much. They have so much. They're so happy. I could have stayed there. Like I told my husband, I said, if you ask me of any of our trips that we've gone to, we travel the world, where would I want to go back? And I said, I would want to go back to Africa, that kind of thing. It's just so amazing. But let's start with the Aloha Always framework. And it's a framework that God gave me when I was trying to write my book, and I was like coming out of the domestic violence. I've done all the work, and people were saying, you need to write this book. And I truly didn't want it to just be a whole rehash of all the bad things that I went through. And as when I first started writing it, that's what I was feeling. I was like, no, I don't, this is not going to be a published book. I'm not going to do this, you know? And so I prayed and I asked God, I was like, if you truly need me to write my testimony, then you need to help me because I've never written a book before and I don't know how. And he said, I gave you everything in Aloha. I was like, okay, I was born and raised here in Hawaii. I know what Aloha is, but I don't understand how this works with the love and the greeting and the, you know, those kind of things, which people relate to Aloha as. And so I started writing it out and it spelled out aloha. The things that I literally walked through, the things that God helped me through, spelled out aloha, and which is the affirmations and actions, leadership and love, overcoming obstacles, health and healing, and acute awareness. And now I share aloha with everyone around the world. I mean, I have talked to people from like Egypt and Africa, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, all over. And when I go through this framework that God blessed me with, they're like, that was so good. And I said, I love seeing how people walk in aloha all over the world. And so let's start with how you can show us how you walk through aloha. The first
Can
A,
I
as
tell
I
you,
said,
sorry, Michelle, on
uh-huh,
that
yeah,
story, you know how you
yeah,
said you've never written a book, it was never something that sort of just came through to you.
hmm,
My
yeah,
story of writing a book is very similar. And the reason is I don't really read books. So the idea of even writing a book was so foreign to me. And in fact, when I was at school, I would pay my sister 50 cents to read all the books and tell me what they were about. So that's how much it was not on the cards for me to write a book. But it was
yeah,
those ideas, something I needed to document it. I needed to take it somewhere. And that's how the book happened for me. In a similar way for you, it wasn't like, I'm going to be an author, I'm going to start writing books. No, it just became the natural conclusion of the way you needed to express what you had.
yeah, that is so good, you know. And I say, with expressing, we need to have that way because like you said, it was just a natural way. And to document that, now other people can hold it, right?
Mm,
If you just kept it to yourself and you're like, I got it. I said, yeah, this is good. But how else would you share that? And now you have the philosophy and now people can buy it. And I have it on my phone because it's an ebook, you know?
yeah.
I can carry it with me. I'm like, oh yeah, you know? And so that is so good. But let's go into the first A, which is affirmations and actions. And you were talking about challenging the way that we live, the way that we think. What are 2 to 3 practical actions that someone can take today to begin living more intentionally instead of just going through the motions? Oh well, we go through the motions all the time in so many different things. But tell us, how can we do that?
Well, look, as humans, we're like computers, right? We run programs, right? Our thoughts are programs. They're based on what we've been fed as inputs in our childhood, in our lives, and based on that, we execute our behaviors and actions as a result of them.
Mhm.
So the first thing I would say is we need to stop running on autopilot. We need to stop just allowing patterns to keep executing unconsciously. And that's why I say in the book, we need to question everything. So, the systems that govern our society, we look at them and we go, well, that's just how things are. So I'm saying, well, no, that's how we've allowed things to be, but things don't have to be like this. So, from a societal point of view, the book is all about challenging those systems and processes that we live in. But for ourselves as individuals, we need to also question our own thoughts and ask ourselves, is this thought serving me? Because often we can be triggered and we'll just react to something. And that's just because it's a program that we're running that says, in this situation, respond like this. So if I could give anything of value to the audience, it is find a way to pause when you feel triggered and deeply analyze whether that thought or response you're going to give is actually truly serving you. And if it's not, then you can change it. And there are ways and techniques that you can use to modify your behavior. But the first step is the pause, just allowing yourself to think before you respond. And that does a whole lot. It opens the door for empathy. It allows us to have gratitude for situations that we're in rather than just going straight to a response. It allows us to actually see the world in a way that we wouldn't see otherwise. We would just go straight to a response. And that, for me, is probably one of the most powerful things that we can do to change our lives and our outcomes as a result of that.
That is so good. Like how many times when you're in a conversation or whatever, and it's like, if you have something to say, that's probably the only thing in your mind that you're waiting to respond, right? You're waiting to respond. Something's happening, and you're like, you're like waiting, like, but you're really not paying attention to anything else already. When you're in that state, you're like, everything else is kind of muted, and you're like, I just need to say what I want to say. I need to do what I want to do,
Mm.
and like you said, it's in the power of that pause. Like, okay, you want to jump out and say something, is that really going to serve you?
Because
You
what
want to do
happens
that.
then is that you miss out on being present, right? You're so
Yes.
worked up on having your say. It's when you ask someone a question, the only reason you're asking them is so that they can say something that gives you an invitation to say your bit. And really what you're doing is you are completely dismissing what they have to say first. And so you never really connect with them. They're just a pawn in your game of being able to, spout what you need to say. And I think a lot of people will do that because they believe that they are right and they need to say what they need to say, and they really don't actually connect with the other person. And I think that pause really does allow that space, that space for someone else, something else to come in. Otherwise, it's just a sealed, I don't know, a sealed tube. You're at this end, the other person's at this end. All you want to do is just fill that tube with your stuff. And I think the problem there is that you're just you're missing out essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, you are. Like I mentioned before, we travel the world and stuff. And I believe that, like, when we travel, we want to know about the other country. We want to know, but I deliberately ask for the get out of this tourist part. Can we see something? Like, where do you go? Where do you guys hang out? What do you do? Like that. And we'll go down, to see what they do, like having coffee in a little coffee stand out in the nowhere, and you're like away from everyone else, just so you can sit and talk with the guide or whoever you have, and be like, now I'm really experiencing Greece. Now I'm really experiencing it. Because, like you said, you don't want to be the one that's just trying to fill this tube with all your stuff. You want to be outside of that. And how many times people want, like actually intentionally, as you speak of, intentional, do that, right? So we're like I asked about going through the motions. You don't want to just be going through the motions. So that was really good. Thank you for sharing that. In the L for Aloha is leadership and love. Sorry, let me drink some. Ah, so I have coconut water. I'm not advertising this or nothing.
I'm having water, and there's nothing to advertise.
Yeah. But yeah.
I
So
thank God for
leadership
my
and love.
drink.
Leadership and love. The message speaks to systems and societal norms, your message. So what does leadership look like in a world that needs more empathy? Because we surely can see that in all the things. Watch the news. We really do need a world that has more empathy. And how do we lead with both truth and compassion?
Mm, yeah, that's a powerful question there. I think there's two parts to that. One is changing the systems that we live in, because leadership at a higher level is more difficult to do when everything around you says you need to operate at this level, right? So, and that's why I'm advocating systemic change to make it easier for people to operate at that higher level without the friction that they face trying to work against the system. But all of us can lead with intent. So it all gets back to not just sitting in the passenger seat, but actually driving. And we can choose where we want to drive to, if we are in the driver's seat. But before we're in the driver's seat, we have to plug in the destination. Where are we heading, firstly? So without that, without having, and that's where the intent comes from, without actually having that destination plugged in through ourselves, our moral compass, where are we going? Um, you can get in the driver's seat, but still not know where you're going. So you're halfway there. You're no longer a passenger, but you're driving, but you still don't know where you're going. So having a clear intention of, what is my true north? And I talk about this in the book, where often we're following our North Star, but is it true north or is it magnetic north? Because our true north is something deep down we know. It's our intuition. It's what we know deep down to be true. Magnetic north is often where we're pulled to because of politics, agendas, whatever it might be. We're forced or at least coerced to move into a certain direction. And so it's really about the intent. Are we intent on just following the magnetic north, or do we really want to get back onto our true north destination? And that requires a little bit of soul searching. It requires us sometimes to stand up to everything around us that appears misaligned and being able to be true to ourselves. And that's not always easy. When you live in a world where a lot of other stuff and noise is going on, to be able to be true to yourself. And I think, again, that's where that pause comes in, because you're every moment questioning, am I on my destination with this decision? And that's the true intention comes from, it's an active process. It's not like, well, I thought about, I did a vision board a year ago and that's it. That's my life set now. No, it's a conscious decision every day to choose that North Star.
That is so good. You mentioned like the vision board or things. How many times people do that, right? And you have the best intentions of that, and you have all those great pictures, and this is what I want, but then they put it away, right? They put it up, and it sits there, and you're like, you got to go refer back to it because you're really not, like you said, following your true north. You're not actually on that path. You're being pulled into all the other stuff, like into the job, into the politics. And you're like, wait, that was what I wanted. That's what I really wanted. Why am I not there yet? And like, it's life, and to pause and to think and be like, I need to get back to that. I need to get back to where I really want to be. Is this truly serving me? Is this what I'm doing serving me? I mentioned that I was doing early childhood education before, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. I'm like, and then I kept doing it and kept doing it, and I was like, is this really what I want to do?
Yeah.
And that's how it is with a lot of people, right? They start something, they're doing it, and all of a sudden it's no longer bringing you joy. It's no longer serving you, but because you've invested so much time in it, you feel like this is it. This is where I am. This is what I do. My podcast that I had earlier was with this lady. She studied law. And with law, you're in, like she said, university for 5 years, and then you have to do a whole other year, and then you have to do, she was like 7 years in, and she's like, do I really want to do this? Is this what I really want to do? And it wasn't. It
Yeah.
wasn't.
And
So,
that's it. We often just keep doing things because that's the way we've done it, right? And or we've
yeah,
invested so much that we feel, oh, I can't really walk away from that. Like I've done 3 or 5 years of studying, and now, can I really change careers after investing so much time in that? But at the end of the day, you have to look forward, you have to reevaluate. We have to keep pivoting all the time. Life is moving very fast, and if we don't move with it, you get left behind. And so, if what gave you joy once was right for you back then, but you're now a different person now, right? Because you've had new experiences, you've taken on new concepts, you've grown. And when you grow, why stay back in that old place that served you then when you are now here? And many
yeah,
people are fearful. They're scared of the unknown. They're scared of taking a leap. I'm an employee. I would like to start my own business, but it's scary. I don't know. Should I? Shouldn't I? And so we hold ourselves back, and we have self limiting beliefs, and we allow ourselves to be less than. And I think um, again, questioning ourselves, knowing where our true north is, and seeing, are we always in the right lane that we need to be in? And often we're not, and that's okay. But we need to build up that awareness to be able to say, well, hang on a minute, what are the tools I need to actually see? Am I doing what I need to be doing? So yeah.
yeah, that is so good because, you know, people don't realize that even our physical bodies, we're changing all the time. Cells die and grow again. And so you're truly a new person. You really are. And like you mentioned, what served you then, it was then, but it is okay to lead yourself out of that and do something else that's pulling you to your true north. And
And in business, if you look at how many corporates have a mission statement and it sounds
mhm,
beautiful, it reads beautifully, but how many of them look at it? How many of them follow it? How many of them are living it?
right. Yeah, that is true. And that's perfect to lead into the L for Aloha because it's leadership and love. You know, we can live in the past, and you mentioned the mission statement. Sometimes people can't even say it. They're like, "Oh, wait, what mission statement?" Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was back then, it was written at the beginning, but how many people are actually knowing it and living it, right? So to recognize and to be like, this is my past, this is where I was, this is no longer serving me. Like Emanuela mentioned this morning, it wasn't like serving her, but because she spent so much time and she was invested, other people were telling her, "How can you do this? How can you want to walk away to all this stuff that you've already put in?" Because it doesn't serve her anymore. Can you imagine if she said, "Okay, yeah, I'll listen to you and I'll live this life for 20 years?" She'll be
Yeah,
miserable, right? So
exactly.
lead,
So we need a mission
yeah.
statement for ourselves, not just for business, for ourselves, right? We
Mm-hmm.
need to know this is my true north path. This is my goal in life. I'm here to serve, I'm here to do this, and then we need to honor that.
Yes, see, so good. That is so good. And overcoming those obstacles, being okay with the people, the things that come into you, realizing, no, this is not serving me. I want to go here. And like you said, writing that mission statement for yourself and truly living it and not letting other people dictate your life, right? You don't want
You'll
that.
always have people who want to come in and tell you how you should live your life, right? And some of them may be well intended in the, but
Yeah,
maybe it's coming from their place, right? And their place is not
yeah,
your place. And you just need to
exactly.
recognize that. Again, the pause gives you that ability to question.
I love that. Their place is not your place. I love
Yeah.
that. I got to write that down. So, a lot of people sense something is off, but they stay stuck. And we just mentioned that, like recognizing that. So, what are the biggest mental or emotional barriers that keep people from questioning the system, and how can they break through them?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. A couple of things. One is the feeling of helplessness. Like, what can I do? I'm a small fish in a big pond. What impact can I have? What can I do? So, and that's, when you talk about big systemic change, I understand that. You're talking trying to play the game of politics um, and corporates and a whole lot of things. And it's hard to change those things. But putting that aside for a minute, as an individual, when you feel stuck, fear obviously prevents you from moving forward. And as I said, often it's self doubt. Do I have the ability? And then having people in your ear telling you, no, that's not a good idea. I don't think you should do that. It's also our ability to take on new challenges and knowing that everything will be okay. And I think if you're a person of faith, that can be an easier process to do. But if you're on your own and you're trying to figure out how can I do this? Um, I think the key thing is to surround yourself with community, with like-minded people who can help you get there, because you're not alone. You're not the only person who's wanted to leave a job or do this or do that. You surround yourself with people and you will feel the strength that comes from that community bond. If you're all in this together, it's a lot easier than being all in this alone, right? And so, you may not have a partner, you may not have, key people in your life at this stage, but you can find those people. And it's important if you put it out there. As soon as you start being vulnerable and opening up, people come to you. The right people come to you. It's when we keep it to ourselves and we suffer in silence, we feel the most alone and isolated. But that's our choice. It's not that the world doesn't have good people out there who will help you. But if your story to yourself is, I'm struggling and I'm going to keep struggling and I've got to find a way out on my own, that's hard. That's really hard. And so it's find your tribe, find your people who are aligned and who will support you to be the best version of yourself that you can be.
That's excellent. Beautiful. You know, I went to a place called Kalaupapa, and there is where they moved all of the lepers when the leprosy was huge here in the islands. And they wanted to keep everyone else safe, but they moved everyone to this very, very remote spot on Molokai. And it's surrounded on three sides by the ocean, and not just nice beach like you see on TV or movies. It was the rugged coastline, right? And so it's not like they could just jump in the water and escape, nothing like that. And the other side is this huge sheer cliff. When I went there, I knew about the story. I knew about Father Damien and all of that. And you mentioned about faith and how having faith does help and it makes things easier. The people in Kalaupapa, because they had Father Damien and they had the sisters of Saint Francis there, they had the faith, right? They had the faith. They were helped out. What I didn't know is that when they moved the people to that area in Kalaupapa, there was other people there already. It wasn't like nobody was living there. There was people who were already living there. So what did they choose to do? Give them leprosy, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not right. This is not how it should have been. How can they, how could they have done it? I know I can't change the past, but like you were saying, right? Things happen and you're like, what am I going to do ahead for the future? Those kind of things. You got to move ahead. And so, literally, after visiting Kalaupapa and thinking about the rights of every human being, not just saving the ones on the main parts of the island, keeping everybody safe, moving the people with the disease there, but there's other people, they're human too, like, and so it really bothered me. It really, really bothered me. I came home and now I am certified human rights consultant because I can't change what happened in the past, but I surely can change what can happen in the future. And I think like that's when we question it, right? We question, like how I was saying when I got there, I was like, wait a minute, did you just say this? So you mean, right? You got to pay attention, you got to question, and you have to be able to say, then what can I do?
Mm.
Because if you keep pointing outside, what can they do? Then you're going to be waiting a long time. And we are the change makers. We are the ones who can make differences in the world. If everybody waited, nothing's going to happen. So
There's a
that's
lot
why I
more
feel,
of us, right, than there
yeah,
are of those holding us back, but yet we feel they've got the power, we don't have the power. And yet the reality is actually very different, right? If we wanted, people have said to me, why don't you go into politics and talk about all these ideas? And I said, because then I've got to follow the political system. And the system is
hmm
flawed to begin with. I have much better influence being a lobby group outside of politics to make things happen than I would within the system. And that's so you got to find your way to make things happen.
yeah. But we can be that difference in the world and cause that healing, that health, and the help, give that help to people. So your book, it's so important because people need to really start questioning. They really need to pay attention to what is happening around them and be like, wait a minute, this has got to change. And
It
what can
has
I
to
do?
change. Yeah, what can I do about it? You know what? I look at the
Yeah.
world and I look at the countries and the borders and the politics. And what I'm disheartened about is that a country will do what it can to protect its citizens at the expense potentially of others. And I question, but we're all humans. It's not like, you know, a border is a man-made thing. It's not like we came into this world and there were borders and we were naturally supposed to be segregated. We
Mhm.
created this division, and that means if you live on one side of the border versus on the other, your life can be completely different. And it's not
Yeah.
through any fault of yours, it's just the luck of the draw of where you happen to be born. And for me, that feels so arbitrary, that feels so unfair, that didn't do anything wrong, and yet I will have a life that goes this way instead of that way. And I think the problem that we have is we don't see us all as humanity. We see it's me versus you, and that has to change.
Yes, definitely. And it's almost like who has the money to put themselves in this better position, right? But what if there's someone who has, so I mentioned that I taught early childhood education. You see the children, they're like, you can see one excelling and the other not. And so you try to help both of them. But the one that who's excelling maybe doesn't have the finances to go to the better schools once they're out of ECE. The one that is kind of doing nothing really, you know, they got the money. And then so now they're in a better school, better. And you're like, shouldn't it be equal? Shouldn't it be the same? Shouldn't they have the same opportunities? Not just because one can pay and one cannot. Shouldn't they both have the same opportunities? We're all human, like you said, right? We're all human. So why is someone else who's truly got the insight and that talent and that natural ability getting less
And that's
just because
because
they don't have the
we've got a
finances?
world that's a have and a have not world, right? And we've created that. It's not necessarily the natural order of things. We've created that. It is, we've created capitalism, which says, some people will have wealth and other people won't have wealth. And okay, that's fine. But I believe everyone should have a minimum level of life sustainability, right? Not that you shouldn't be able to do more and get more for yourself, but you should have a minimum floor that everyone has access to. And I talk about this in the book, the concept of a universal basic income, right? That everyone is entitled just purely by being here on the planet is entitled
Mhm.
to a minimum level of resources and dignity. And that, I think, is if we can do that, and this model has been tried in many countries. I mean, Alaska has it with the Alaska Permanent Fund, right? And so what they've done is they've taken the natural resources in the ground that they know won't be there forever and said, well, we're going to remunerate our citizens from the wealth that's in the country. And so, every year an amount of money is paid to every single Alaskan citizen. And, the Marshall Islands have implemented it. It's happening all around. But if you close your eyes and you say, well, that's just a hit to our bottom line in our budget and we don't really want to do that. Well, that's not a resource problem. That's a human decisioning problem. And so, we can solve homelessness and poverty tomorrow if we want to. The problem is we're not wanting to. And that for me is more of the concern.
Yeah. And that's what we need to, like you said, question and try to be that one who makes the change. I know there's a lot. Health and healing. And there's, we can go into the whole thing of even healthcare is like that for some people, you know. But in the health and healing in Aloha, awakening to deeper truths can be completely uncomfortable, and we all know that. But how do we process that internal shift in a healthy way without becoming overwhelmed or frustrated or disconnected? Like you mentioned, I'm okay, but I'm going to do this all by myself because I don't want to say, you know.
Yeah, it can be very unsettling. Once you've seen something, you can't unsee it.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's that feeling of being unsettled that actually is showing up the misalignment. Because now you realize how you've been thinking before, and you've seen something new that's just opened your eyes. And if it wasn't unsettling, then it would only really be a subtle change. So it's
Hmm.
actually that's a transformation occurring, and you should
Yeah.
embrace that transformation. It's easy to be scared of it, and it's easy to feel shaken, like everything that you thought to be X is now Y. Um, but I think it's a case of embracing it in a way, not going to an extreme, right? I wouldn't say, "Wow, I've discovered this new thing, and now I'm abandoning everyone I knew. I'm joining this cult," and I mean that. That's what cults do, right? They take you away from everything that was familiar before and they put you into a new environment. I'm not saying we do that. I'm saying that see and have this new awareness, but learn more about it. Because obviously, when you find something new at that point in time, it's amazing. Everything's incredible, right? It's like falling in love. Everything's incredible at that point in time. And so, but it's progressing gently. I'm not saying you throw out everything that you knew before. It's just this new awareness of starting to look at things with different eyes. I have a chapter in the book called The Magic Glasses, and it's about seeing the world differently than you saw it before because of this new awareness that you have. And so, yeah, use that unsettling feeling to rise up. Use that to power you to now take what you've now seen and learned to actually go into the world and do something with it. So it shouldn't just be a theoretical thing that you've just experienced. It should translate into action. And it's that unsettling feeling within your body, that visceral feeling that you have from it, that will power you to actually go and make change actually happen.
Right, right. Just the same as when I was in Kalopapa. Both my husband and I we went on the same trip,
Yeah.
right? We went on that little same propeller plane that took us over to the other island, but I got a different result, right? I was moved in a different way. And that's how we are, I don't want to say built because we could learn it, but sometimes that unsettling thing in you, that questionable, like, wait a minute, you were saying that there was other people, and so now that there's 8,000 people buried here on the island, that wasn't all the lepers that was brought here? Is that what I'm hearing? Is that what I'm truly hearing? And it just got to me, right? Where my husband, he's like, this is such a beautiful place. This is so amazing. Look at how green everything like is. Yeah,
But see, we're
you,
different. And it's
yeah,
all
we're
what
different,
I talk
right?
about. Everything, those inputs from our childhood, from everything else that
Mm.
shapes us, shapes how we see the world, right?
Yeah,
I talk about it in like, it's a story I tell in the book too. You're walking into a cinema, to the movie theater, and with a friend. And as you walk in, there's the smell of freshly cooked popcorn. And as you're going into the cinema, you're thinking about the times you used to come to the movies with your parents and you'd sit and enjoy watching a movie together. The other person's feeling goes back to a birthday party when they were teased and things that happened to them and people were throwing popcorn at them. So again, exact same experience, two different feelings that come about from that. And that's how we operate. We seem to think that everyone sees the world the way we see it. But again, I get back to that's only our reality. It's not the reality. And having empathy allows us to understand that everyone will experience the world in a different way.
yeah, that's excellent. The empathy and being okay with people being different. If
Mm,
they see something different, it's not like we have to be like, you need to see it my way because they have rights. That is their right to think about it that way, feel about that way, whatever. I think so many times we're like, I want to impose my right on you.
exactly. We do it. We want to be right. We want to control the narrative. And so this is my experience. This is truth. But no, it's not. It's only your truth.
Exactly. Yeah. And that to me is so key is that that is your truth and be okay with that. Be okay. When I was going through all of the domestic violence and all of the things like that, my awareness and acute awareness is the last A in Aloha, but it was shot, I would say, because I wasn't even looking at myself anymore, right? I wasn't even realizing what I was so deep into. I was like, this is not going to turn out well, right? I knew how dangerous it was getting. I knew the level of violence was getting higher and higher. When that last straw, and I was hiding in a closet because I was like, he had to answer the door because his son came and said, "Oh, the police is at the front door," right? So he went off and he went to go. I didn't even know his son was in the house at the time because I felt like, oh, if you could hear that or if you could hear things happening, why didn't you do anything, right? But the son didn't do anything, he just stayed in the room. And so when he knocked on the door, I was like, oh my gosh, someone else is in this house. You know, I felt like I was all alone. But he said that there's a police at the door. So he left to go and I was so scared. I went into my cousin's room and I hid in the closet, right? And you're thinking, how did that ever happen in my life? How did I get here? And so I was so scared. I didn't want to open the door. I could hear all the stuff going on. I didn't want to open the door. And then there was a knock on the door, and I'm acting like I'm not there. And they're like, Michelle, are you? And I'm like, say nothing. And so I'm so scared. And then the police officer was like, you can open the door. He's not here. And I was like, do I trust you? Do I believe you? You know? And so I did. I opened the door and everything was good, I guess, because they took me out and I was being helped. But I didn't realize what was happening to me until they said, you need to sit down. We're going to call um, a photographer, I don't know what they call it, but like a officer who's going to take pictures, right? And I'm thinking, oh, why? You know, he's not here already. I'm okay. But I wasn't okay. They could see the damage on me and took me to the hospital and everything like that. And I was beat up and I couldn't even see that in myself. Like I didn't even realize until they said they had to go take pictures. And when I saw myself in the mirror in the emergency room, I was like, how did I get here? How did I get here? So it's that awareness of how did we get here, right? Not just in the domestic violence thing, but in life. There's things that we have to question ourselves and say, how did I get here? How what can I do? I gotta make things better, right? And that was my turning point in that awareness because you have to be so aware. And your book calls for a new level of that awareness. And so what does true awareness look like in daily life? And how do we stay grounded while thinking differently from the world around us?
Yeah. Um, the I have an acronym called HACK, like hack your human operating system,
Mhm.
because it really requires us to rethink how we operate, because we often do just operate. I mean, in that situation, you were coping. That was your body, your mind coping with the situation. So, you didn't see yourself as battered. You saw yourself as, I'm okay. And it was more for reassurance for yourself, right? That you were doing okay under the circumstances. And so it was almost like you didn't see it. But that's not because it wasn't there and that you didn't see it, but you were able to interpret it in a way that helped you cope and survive. And I think, we do that in so many aspects of our lives that we not become blind to the fact, but we find a way to keep moving forward. what I'm proposing is a level of awareness where we're constantly questioning. So we catch that at an earlier stage, right? We don't let it escalate to the point where, things have gone so far off trajectory that at that point only do we have that realization. So it means in every aspect of our lives, in business, in our relationships, in everything that we do, that we are halt is the H for hack. We pause, as I mentioned, we consider what's going on here. Is this doing me any good? A is analyze. That's the questioning of everything. C is we change it. If it's no longer serving us, we make the change. We decide that it may have served me once. It may have now become a new way of operating because it served me once and my body uses that as a default mode of being. But does it serve me today? And then if you implement that change, then K is the keep. We keep that change, we lock it in, we repeat it, but then we go back to the beginning again and we pause all over again when it happens again and we ask, is it still serving me? And that's the way that we're able to keep upgrading ourselves. So we're no longer the old version of ourselves in new situations. We're always the newest version of ourselves. We're always getting the latest updates for
Yeah,
ourselves as we keep progressing through life.
that is so good. I wish I had it back then, you know, that hack, because then I would have been able to question things before it got, and like you said, the you don't have to wait until you're in this big realization like, oh my goodness, how did I get here? You question it in the beginning so you can make the changes quicker.
Because if
And
you're questioning everything, it's not like I'll only question it when something really big happens.
right.
Because we might not see it as something big because our mind's programmed us not to see it as this big event. So if you're
Hmm.
questioning everything, it's just part of your default way of being every day.
Yeah, that is so important. Oh, that is so good. Everything that you've shared is so important. I wish I knew you back then. I
I'm
wouldn't have
sorry for what you
spent.
went through, Michelle, but it
Yeah.
is you did have that realization and you did come through and
Hmm.
you did break through. And thank God
Yeah.
you are here and the person you are today.
Yeah. And so even though that was the hardest time of my life, actually became a powerful time because I can now use that experience and use that to create a better life, a better change for someone else. So I thank God the way that it worked. But if someone is listening to this conversation right now and walks away with just one shift in perspective, one thing, what do you hope that shift is? And what is the legacy message behind the philosophy?
Um, if people can question everything, I mean, that's the one takeaway. As you said
Hmm.
yourself, if you had that back then, what could it have changed for you? If
Yeah.
people can learn to question everything that's going on daily, whether it's in their personal life, in the way that they view the world, in the systems that they operate within, in their contributions to the world, question whether what you're doing is aligned with your North Star. And if it's not, do something different, make a change, but question what that change should be. It should always try and be aligned with your North Star. Again, not the magnetic north, not the way the world may want to pull you sometimes in that direction, but in the true North Star that is your, well, as Maslow put it, your self actualized self. And so if you can always stay on track for that, I think you'll always find yourself in alignment. You'll get to the end of your days without regrets, and you'll feel that everything you've done has been for the purpose that you set your mission statement to be for your life.
So good. Oh, thank you so much, Alex, for coming on and sharing all of this. It is so hugely important, and everyone needs to read your book, get your program, whatever. But thank you for sharing your heart, your insights, and your bold perspective on questioning everything. That is so powerful. I loved it. So, everyone who's listening right now, who's listening to the recording of this, whatever it is, if this episode spoke to you, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it, because it is with sharing, it is with asking, is there more to life than this? We can make that change. We can be those change makers in this world. And if you are ready to step into your voice or your purpose or your calling, then stay connected. But Alex, how can they stay connected to you?
The book, here is the book. There's a book.
Nice, thank
So it's
you.
available in paperback, Kindle, and audio book, all available through Amazon. But people can find out more from the website, which is thephilosophy.net.
Thephilosophy.net. Okay. I will make sure to get your links, and I will link your book, the Amazon links, in the show notes. And do you have a website or anything like that?
That's it,
Oh,
thephilosophy.net.
the dot net. Okay. I'm always paying attention to the dot com thing, but
Yeah.
yes, it is dot
Well, I'm
net.
building a network, so there you go. It's .net.
Yes, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Ah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for coming in and listening and just joining us here on the Walking in Aloha Let's Talk Story podcast. Is there any last words that you have to say, Alex, to
Oh,
share?
Michelle, look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I always appreciate your candid responses to things. You share so much of yourself as well. It, enables me to open up more as well. And, I truly believe that the messages that you're spreading, that we're all doing here, do make a difference, do change the world, and we just keep doing what we do.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you again. So, everyone, until next time, until the next episode of the Walking in Aloha Let's Talk Story podcast, until our next amazing guest like Alex here, I thank you guys all for coming in, and do question everything around you, as Alex said. So important. Until next time, aloha and ahui ho.